5, 4, 3, 2.
My research question was the socioeconomic and geopolitical impact of technological advancements throughout human history. Before getting into my research, I'd like to give some background information. First of all, who am I? My name is Benjamin Merrit, and the reason I chose my topic was because of the long and interesting history in regards to history and the way it shapes the human race over time. Not only because it's interesting, but because it gives a detailed and precise reason for how our modern civilization came to be, as well as the reasons for why we, being citizens of the United States, benefit from the rest of the world as a global superpower. From the common everyday technologies that we mindlessly use without fully realizing how exactly it came to be. Another reason I felt this was an important topic to research is the fact that history can also be used to explain the ways in which people from different continents and cultures are treated in the modern world. How my research is different from everyone else's is the fact that rather than conducting a study where I would survey the students at Shadle Park High School about their viewpoints of correlations between technological advancements and the disproportionate treatment and distribution of wealth as an effect of these new technologies, I would instead focus on one particular piece of literature that gives an in-depth examination of technology and its potential effects on geopolitics. From there, I would conduct a comparative analysis with another piece of literature that gives another point of view in the same field of study. All this was done in order to, one, potentially legitimize the claims made in my main source of literature, and two, to gain an understanding of where more research would be needed to be conducted in order to gain enough information to fully explain the reason the world is the way it is today, and how the future may end up looking as a result. The importance of my topic that I felt were genuinely important was current world affairs, as ever since 1945, when the US dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, the world was ushered into a new era of geopolitical relationships. Instead of a threat of war, there came a threat of global, total nuclear annihilation, making the invention of the atomic bomb one of the most defining moments of modern history, because it achieved many things that previous technologies simply couldn't compare to. That being having the potential to erase humanity from the face of the earth, but also because it completely changed the political climate forever. The Cold War from 1949 to 1991 was directly linked to nuclear weapons that meant no conversations between hostile countries could be achieved without comparison in the amount of nuclear weapons one country owned. A more recent example would be the threat of the regime-led state of North Korea, whose hopes to use nuclear technology as its main tool for political talks with the rest of the world instead of a more conventional means. Another more important reason for this topic is the growing gap between technology and the average worker. As technology increases in the world of business, the amount of jobs available to an average everyday worker decreases. This is because the cost of a computer doing the job of a worker is far less than hiring an actual worker themselves. This doesn't only affect first world countries, as it could greatly affect third world countries that rely on jobs from foreign nations to supplement their economy. The moment a robot is able to do their job better and for far less of a cost, a larger percentage of their income will be taken away as their jobs will be taken, leading to a growing amount of poor and jobless people, which causes an even greater difference in socioeconomic statuses in comparison to other countries. The final, most important thing that I believe was needed to be discussed in this research is how the growth of technology has been driven by conflict throughout history. To say technology has been invented strictly through a need for improved weapons and machines in war would be an erroneous statement. However, to say that many parts of technology have been improved or was a starting point for future important inventions from a need in a battlefield, or was a starting point for future important inventions from a need in a battlefield can be supported by a very large amount of breakthroughs in both science and technology. From the use of airplanes in World War II, or the invention of many cures to diseases and surgical instruments thought up by doctors on battlefields, the importance of this thinking is about how the future of technology would or will look like in a more modern setting, such as today, with or without total global conflict. My primary resource was War Made New by Max Boot. My reason for choosing this book was the fact that it largely is supplemented by its geopolitical lens, and the fact that it focuses on the advent of technology used in battlefields that directly correlates to a shift in political favor to those who use and create these new sources of technology. The central theme of this book is technological revolutions, which in this case is 4 different ideas stemming from a gunpowder revolution, a first industrial revolution, a second industrial revolution, and finally the information revolution. In each one of these different categories, Max Boot gives about 2 to 3 examples in each revolution of battles fought or used using these certain technologies from that moment changed the landscape of not only warfare, but the geopolitical relations, what is given a rise to and what was destroyed in the process. The first of these revolutions was the Gunpowder Revolution, which saw its beginning in the French invasion of Italy in 1494. The new technology that had been created out of gunpowder was the cannons, which changed the siege warfare throughout the world, as before it took approximately 6 to 8 months to siege a single castle, whereas once the advent of the cannon was used, it took hours or maybe even days. A geopolitical effect of these cannons was the fact that it ended the Italian Renaissance, which was the creation of art and different ideas, as well as a profound impact on the Italian society as itself. The second example given in this category was the Spanish Armada defeated in 1588. The British defeated the Spanish Armada by using smaller and more lightweight cannons, as opposed to the Spanish's large ships with large cannons that could not maneuver correctly. This led to British independence from the Spanish, as well as allowing for the British to rule over the seas for many years to come, which led to an extremely large geopolitical impact as the fact that they could travel over the seas into the new Americas and create colonies. The third and final example in this is the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631, which saw the first use of mass amounts of soldiers using gunpowder, and such as flintlocks or muskets, as opposed to swords and spikes. The second theme of the first industrial revolution was commented by Max Boot as the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, which saw the use of Maxim guns and steamships primarily. What makes this important is the fact that these Maxim guns were used as the first automatic weapons in warfare by the British, which led them to spread European colonial empires as a total destruction over the African continent, as there was no match against African people fighting with spikes and machetes and other older weapons as opposed to actual machine guns. The second was the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, which saw steel battleship fleets and wireless telegraphs. This major battle fought in the Russo-Japanese War led to further distrust between the Russians and the Japanese, as well as pushing other countries to use new forms of communication such as telegraphs, which saw geopolitics changing throughout history, with the fact that before it would take weeks, if not months, to communicate between countries, but with the invention of the telegraph, it would take minutes or hours to get communications from different countries. During the Second Industrial Revolution, the primary focus of the book was during World War II, one of which was being the Battle of France, in which the new technology used was tanks and trucks. This changed the political climate of Europe entirely, and is even seen today in the fact that Germany, in its blitzkrieg throughout Europe, completely destroyed the landscape as well as the relationships between different countries. The second use of the Second Industrial Revolution was the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, which saw the introduction of atomic bombs, which changed the imperialistic ways of Japan, as well as leading a new political climate for the entire world to a shift in wars of superpowers from conventional warfare to proxy warfare like Vietnam and Afghanistan, so as to prevent mutually assured destruction. In more recent context is the information revolution, which is given its start in 1991 during the Gulf War, in which modern technology faces more primitive and not as equipped enemies. Warfare against countries that have scarcely any resources or technology themselves led to controversies about the fairness of warfare, as well as unrest in the majority of the Middle East, which also led to the Iraq War. The invasion of Afghanistan saw a new technology seen as net warfare, which was the invention of, or the use of internet and computers to communicate between both US and Afghanistan forces. This stems from 9/11, which reformed US policies in the Middle East, as well as immigration policies between the US, who they will allow in, who will they allow out, so that nothing like 9/11 ever happened again. During the Iraq War, the technology that was used was primarily seen as improvised explosive devices, which also led to instability in different regions in the Middle East, because there was much for them to come back to, because there's so many bombs laying around that there's a potential for death everywhere. The final point made in the book is future revolutions, which saw the thinking of Max Boot himself about the future that holds, one of which was satellites, which saw the new high ground that allows the US military to maintain superiority over countries, as well as the potential for countries having a Star Wars, quote unquote, attempting to destroy other enemy satellites through the use of missiles, transmission jammers, or even lasers. His other point was the fact that robots, primarily the use of UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, would be used for surveillance or even precision attacks such as predator drones. This is seen as a shift towards gathering information rather than just attacking. My research proposal was figuring out how credible is War Made New in comparison to other experts in the same field. I decided to do a comparative analysis between War Made New by Max Boot and Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. My reason for this was the fact that Guns, Germs, and Steel is more of a socio-economic book about the effects of technology and different cultures, whereas Max Boot is more focused on the warfare, as well as just the battles being fought instead of their actual implications. My limitations to this study was the fact that I have my own personal biases about what I know and could be projecting upon my paper and my understanding, as well as the biases of the writers who may or may not feel that they are doing that. I also do not have enough resources or time to fully grasp what even experts in this field struggle to understand, as I need to read more about more experts besides Jared Diamond as well as Max Boot, and a few months of time trying to understand hundreds of years of history is not enough. I don't have enough experience or knowledge that I possess myself to make a complete comparison until I would decide to read more about these experts. And also the fact that there's more than one correct answer, because throughout history there's so many variable factors that one answer could be correct, whereas the other one could also be correct. My findings were that Guns, Germs, and Steel offers a more credible and expansive analysis of geopolitics and socioeconomics as a whole, due in part by the fact that War Made New is more European conquest and advancement centralized, whereas Guns, Germs, and Steel talks more about the rest of the world, whether it's explaining the conception of Africa and Japan, whereas War Made New simply just talks about the warfare between them. I saw that there would be a need for more research, because in order to make a more fair and information-backed opinion, there would need to be a larger variety of comparison between experts, as far than just these two. Finally, I wanted to talk about the future implications of what could be seen technology and geopolitically wise. I asked the question of how can technology thrive in a future in a more positive way that allows for the socioeconomic status of poor countries to improve, whether that means that we incorporate them more into the way that we improve our technology so that all of us can thrive together. I also asked the question, is there a chance that relationships between countries can strengthen and allow for a more unified push to advance technology? I believe that countries like the United States, China, and Russia in the future alone will have and will achieve leaps in technologies, but together can do so much more. As well as will technology progress so far that warfare will become obsolete, whether this is the fact that robots would be used or there would be no human casualties at such a point that warfare would be just throwing cash to kill someone else and there's just be no point of it. That's the end of that slide. There's no end slide.
So Ben, after you chose your research project of comparing the two books, or at least initially the first book, which information guided your choice of a research method? So how did that lead to like how you would compare it?
I would say the fact that I would definitely need to make sure that War Made New was more about how credible it would be. That's the whole point of what my methods would be, is to make sure that War Made New, what Max Boot is saying, is actually correct and not just his own opinions. So the fact that I needed to use another book to figure out what I'm trying to say, which is good decision why I use Guns, Germs, and Steel, because it's a more credible source as compared to Max Boot's book, because there's more experts who have their opinion on it.
Well, Ben, how might your conclusions or your findings relate to the current body of work in this field?
My conclusions was, in general, what any expert would think of when he's doing a project is the fact that he just doesn't have enough information to make a correct assumption about what could happen in the future, as well as in both of these books, they hit on the fact that the future is based upon the past, but you can never technically predict it because it's unpredictable because it's the future.
If you had, think about your initial curiosity that led to your inquiry. What other areas of inquiry might that same curiosity have led to?
Originally, I was going to do a research study about the causes and effects of nuclear energy, whether that be talking about nuclear weapons or nuclear energy as a whole, whether it's good or bad, and I was going to do a research question about what the students of Shadow Park High School felt about nuclear energy, any misconceptions they could potentially have, or felt the need that there'd be other alternatives that would be better. So I was going to branch along that, but that kind of brought me along more of a broad sort of question, thinking about geopolitics more specifically, because I was going to focus my question in on North Korea and different relations between the US and Russia, and the fact that you can't misstep without the possibility of potentially killing the entire Earth with nuclear weapons. So I was just going to figure out where everyone was at Shadow Park.
Nice job.